in the previous assignment, let's go through each one of the program here and then discuss the solution. So coming to the first problem, it was write a program to calculate the sum of elements in a list, and the list has been given. You have given a list and we have to add all the items within that list and then give the sum. Like for this, because like we need to add upon like all the items of a list, and like we don't know like how many number of items are there in this list. Here we could see there are 4, but if I give 5, it should still work, right? So for that reason, so what we can do is, first initially let's take a variable sum of list equal to 0. So I'm initializing a variable initially, saying that like the sum of the list is 0, okay, because we did not count anything. Let's say the sum is 0, and we will be adding each of the element in this list to this sum. So I mean, we would be adding first this 20 to it. So if you add 20, it would be like this, right? So and then add to this 20, we add one more 50, and to this we add like 100, and then to this we add minus 10. So we have to do like this, right? So it should iterate over each element here. So for that reason, we would be using loops. So we can use for loop, and if we want to get the first element, we have to like, let's say first let's define the list. So list, I'll write like input list equal to 20, 50, 100, minus 10. So in this list, if you want to access this 20, we have to give input list of 0. And similarly, if we want to access this 50, we have to give input list of 1. So it should be iterating over each element here. There is directly in for loop, we have this, right? Each item in list, and then each, so this would give like each element of the list like one at a time, right? So then what we should do is, we have to add it to the existing value. I'll be printing the sum of a list before the sum and after the sum, and let's see how it is increasing. If you run it, yeah, initially first it is 0. Before 0 means first time it is coming here, it's taking item value as 20. Before it was 0, and now to it we are adding 0 plus 20. So 0 plus 20 is 20. That would be stored in this sum of list, and so after value it would print 20, right? See here, and then again it would loop here. Now the item value would be next one, which is 50, and now it would before value, because like previously it is 20, right? So it is taking the 20, and for it we are adding 50 here. 20 plus 50, it is 70. So after value is 70, and then again it would iterate to 100. So 100, previously it was 70, right? So to that 70 we are adding this 100, so it would go to 170, so which is here. Next, last it was like minus 10. So minus 10, it is like previously 170, and now minus 10, it is adding up. So as it is minus 10, so it's a subtraction indirectly. So we have 160 here, so the after value is 160. So this is how it has been printed. So finally, like once it is done, so let's print the sum of list is, I am going to print this sum of list value. Okay, we can also put the value and then run it. So every time you will also know the item value here. So just for better understanding. Hope it is clear. So let's move on to the second question. So write a program to count the number of even and odd numbers in a list. So we need to count the odd numbers and even numbers in this given list. So first let's take the list. So let me again take input list, and now the next thing is, we have to identify the count of like even and odd numbers in the list, right? Hint is also given that odd numbers give remainder 1 when divisible by 0 and even numbers give remainder 0. How to get a remainder is by using a percentage. So first thing, because this is a list, we have to iterate each of the element. So let's use for loop for item in input list. Initially also we need to define what are the outputs, right? So we have to get the count of even numbers, count of odd numbers. So even number count equal to, initially let's say we did not do any iteration, so initially the counts would be 0. For this I am going to add, like similarly the odd count would also be 0. So I am initializing both of these variables from which we will be storing the output as zeros. We are iterating through this list, right? So for element in input list, so this element would be having 1 first, then 5, then 2, like that. So now this element we have to see if it is divisible by 2. Item percentage 2. If this is equal to 0, then it means then it is a even number. So because this would give us the remainder, so percentage 2 would give us remainder. We would be checking if that is equal to 0, then we would be getting true, right? If it is an even. So let's do the same. We have to use if inside and item percentage 2 equal to 0. We can so this is an even number, right? So if it is inside, so let's increase the even count. Even number count equal to even number count plus 1. We are increasing the even number count. So if it is and we can also do if else if, and then same remainder, if it is equal to 1, then its odd number count we can increase, because if it is not even, actually we don't have to write this else if, directly else we can write equal to 1. Okay, so we can write this, or maybe just else would also be fine, because if it is not 0 it would be 1. Only these are the two things can happen if you divisible by 2. So then once you increment the count, so everything is done. Now print even number count is and then similarly odd number count. Let's see if we are running. See, we got like even number count as 3, odd number count as 4. So what we are doing, let's see like in reality what are the odd numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there are 4 odd numbers. Yeah, that's true. And even numbers 1, 2, sorry, even numbers, right? So 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 even numbers. So that's true. We got it correctly. So it would iterate each of the element inside this list, and then it would check like the remainder is 0 or 1. If it is 0, it would increment the count of even, or if it is odd, it would increment the count of odd number, and finally we get the counts. So coming to the third problem here, the question is separate numbers and strings in the list. So you can see in this list we have many of these, right? So there is a mix of integers and the strings. So we should be separating them into 2 lists. I mean, we have to have one list for integers and numbers, and one more list for strings. So let me first copy this and write like input list, and now we need 2 outputs, right? So one output is list of numbers, other output is list of strings. So let me create that num list. So a short form for number list. Initially, because we did not have anything, so let's make it empty list. Okay, so we define an empty list, and then string list also we made it empty. So now we should be identifying each of the element. We have to go to each of the element and identify whether it is a number or a string, and then if it is number, you have to save it to the num list, If it is a string, we have to save it to string list. So for that, first anyway we have to do an iteration first. Item in input list, and now for each of them, so there is a way which we discussed earlier, like on how to identify whether it's a number or a string, right? So we can use that function, so which is called type function. If you are giving type value, so anything like type of 10, if you give, if it is a number, right, so it would give its kind of type, because it's an integer or a decimal, it would come as like a float. If it is a like larger number, it would come as double, like that. So but in case if we use Python, sorry, it's a string, so we would be getting a stir, so which means it's a string. So we would be using this type function to identify whether the item is an integer or a string. So let's use that. Type of item equal to string. So we don't have to give a double quotes, it's a keyword directly, so we can use this. If it now, let's say if this is satisfied, then it's a string, right? So we should be adding this item what we get here, right, into string. So let's take this string list and then dot append, because we want to add it to the existing list which was here. So we have to do append and then item. And if it else, okay, here in case if it's not string, let's store it in a number list. So num list dot append and then item. Let's now finally, once it is done, let me print it. Numbers in a list. Okay, so you can see if you run it, we could see that like Python, this 1000 with the quotes and then like program has been saved in the strings, and numbers 10, 20, 300 are stored in numbers. So even this one, this quotes, because even though if it is a number, that was within the quotes, right, so it would be treated as a string. So for that reason we got like these as strings, this as also a string, and only these as numbers. So that is how it would go to each item and see its type, and then depending on that type it would maybe assign either into a string list or a num list. So now coming to the next problem. So marks of a student in a class stored in a list. So we got like a list which was containing the marks, so that was okay. What was the program? So program is write a program to print the index of items in the list that are greater than 35. So print the index of items. First let's take the list, as it was told like marks, so let me write like marks list. And now okay, we have saved the marks. The next thing is the program is like we have to print the index of items in that list that are greater than 35. So in this marks list, so we have to go to each of the item and see if it is greater than 35, print the index of it, index value we have to print. So for that we should be again iterating. We can do for item in mark list, okay, so like we did in like previous problem, but here we need the index. So index, like we would be getting like if you are only doing like mark list of 0, mark list of 1, so that way we would know actually there the index is 1 or 2 or like that, right? So for that purpose I would be using the other kind of iterating over a list, like which is from I in range 0 comma length of mark list, because it should go from 0 till last, right? So for that reason we have to define it this way, like range of 0 comma length of mark list. So it would start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on till the length of mark list. So for this is one more way of iterating over a list. So previously we are using this item in a input list, right? So this is another way. So now if you want to do, we should be, now the thing is, like in case if we want to access the element, it is through this of I. So this would be giving us the item inside that list. So let me again write like this. For simplicity, I will be using like item equal to mark list of I. So the value within this mark list of I, so and initially it is 0, let's say, so this value would be stored into this item. Now this item, we should check if it is greater than 35. So if item greater than 35, then what we should print that index. Print, so index is what, like I is the index, right? So print I, and there is nothing given if it is not satisfied, right? If it is less than or equal to, there is nothing given, so you don't have to write anything, just like if. Now I think that is it, this program. Let's run it and see. So we got 1 2 3 4 5 6. Wow. 0 is not there. It would start from 0, right? So 0 is not greater than 35. The 0th value in the 0th index is not greater than 35. 1, it is greater than 35, so it should print 1. 2, it is greater than 35. This is greater than 35. This is greater than 35. This is greater than, this is greater, and last, it is equal to 35 but not greater, so it shouldn't print this index. So the 7 is not printed here, only till 6. 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So 7 is not printed, and only till 6 it has printed. So now coming to the next one, here it is also a similar program, but here it was asked to store the marks that are greater than 35 in one list and less than or equal to 35 in another list. So first thing first, let me again takes the mark list, and now the output is like, it is ask is like, you have to have one list which is greater than 35 and one more list which is less than or equal to 35. So let me take two lists, anything we can write this way. So now we have to iterate again for each of the element in the list. So I in range 0 to length of mark list. It can be like this, or you can also use this for item, because we don't need index here, right? So for that purpose we can also use item in mark list. So both are fine, like. And then next thing is, if it is greater than 35, we have to add it to the list greater. So add it in the sense like we have to do append to the list greater, and if it is less than or equal to, which in the sense is like else would also give the same, because if it is not greater than, it means it is less than or equal to. So we can also use it directly like this, dot append, and give item. This would print it here. So now let's do a print. Similarly, marks less than 35, if it is coming correct. Yeah, it is actually coming correct. So you can see the 65, 40, 90, so on, all these are greater numbers, greater than 35, and you can see this 22 and 35 are the items which are less than or equal to 35.